Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. It's nice and lovely to welcome you three back to our year one Usul ad-Din Principles of Islam class. And we are indeed today on the 8th principle, which I find very exciting, which is the principle of Islam is philosophy. So I want to get started. Yeah, good. You got some water. I've got my apple juice. I'm not fasting today, so good idea. Good idea. So I wanted to start with really the word philosophy itself. Okay, the word philosophy is actually a Greek word. Okay, it's a word from Greek. In harfe Yunani hast falsafi, you know. And the first part is love, which is philo, and the second part is wisdom, which is safi. Okay, so eshku ilm yani. This is philo, safi is eshk of ilm. You see, this is the meaning in Zabani Yunani. So the language in the term philosophy, why this term? And we know that in the Arabic language as such, the word philosophy, the way it's constructed, came as a kind of a borrowed word into the Arabic language, more specifically the Muslim theological context, just the same way that we, in the English language, we use the word philosophy just the same, okay? So we could use the term wisdom, or we could use the term love of wisdom, or wisdom's love, or something like this, but we use the word philosophy. And now, of course, you could discuss in today's philosophical currents what this word philosophy actually means. And we will do that, but I'd like to start, as I said, from the very basics, so from the ancient Greek definition, okay? We know, of course, that Islamic philosophy specifically has contributed profoundly to the entire body of work of philosophy on a human scale, okay, at all humanity philosophy, okay. More specifically, the Islamic philosophy contributed greatly to the Renaissance, okay, specifically the Renaissance. Why? Because the Muslim philosophy, which came all the way from, Persia and subcontinent of South Asia and even farther east, all the way through the Arab lands and into Muslim Spain, okay, where during the so-called School of Toledo, this was in the 800 years that Spain was actually Muslim. That's, just think about 800 years, okay, how long that is. The United States has existed for 250 years, okay, and Spain was Islamic for 800 years, okay. So during this time when Spain was Islamic, through different ways, the so-called School of Toledo is a city just about an hour south of Madrid, was created, okay, and its purpose was to translate the works of, particularly the works of the Arab Muslims, also partly of the Jews, into Latin language, or vice versa, translate from Hebrew into Arabic, or Arabic into Latin, or Latin into Hebrew, or vice versa. In other words, the very famous School of Toledo was really like a translation center where this huge kind of intellectual exchange of knowledge and wisdom and philosophy occurred, okay? Now, at the time, it's worth remembering that the Muslims were the greatest philosophers at their time. They were the greatest architects, mathematicians, astronomers, scientists, engineers, musicians, poets, calligraphers, of course, not to mention the military strength and the economic strength, okay, which go with such a, global power, which the Muslims certainly were at the time. And therefore, of course, it was in the interest of the Europeans to learn from them, okay? And so a large part of the European Renaissance, and this is documented, so this is not just my opinion, but you can, you know, this is just one source. I took one source for every kind of movement that I discuss here, but you can find so many sources about the influences of the School of Toledo on the European Renaissance. So please, I urge you to research that. If you're interested in Islamic philosophy, also, you know, look into how the European Renaissance particularly, and in later periods, so-called Enlightenment and the so-called Romantic period were strongly influenced, deeply influenced, respectively, by Islamic philosophy. So this is a whole area of research for itself, yeah? And if one of you year one students decides for your thesis that you'd like to take, you know, this principle, Islamist philosophy, to validate your thesis, then, you know, you're more than welcome. You're very welcome to take this with you, okay? And I encourage you to take this with you if you're interested. Yeah, this is a great subject that you can really deep dive into Islamic philosophy, or just the impact of Islamic philosophy on European philosophy and culture and civilization, okay? So any questions about this, about the history of philosophy, about Al-Andalus and the Islamic impact on Renaissance? Do you have any questions? Then I'll just dive straight into, yeah, we know about what's the so-called golden age of Islam. So this is actually exactly the time from really the beginning of the Abbasid Caliphate, you know, through to the end of the Islamic impact on Al-Andalus, or let's say till the end of Al-Andalus, really, when Fernando and Isabel married in Spain, bringing together the kingdoms of Castilla and Aragon, which in turn led to the expulsion of the Jews and the Muslims from the Spanish Peninsula or the Iberian Peninsula. And so that's kind of the end marker of what's typically called the Golden Age of Islam, and it begins pretty much with the Abbasid Khilafat, yeah, when the Baytul Hikmah was provided by Salman's favorite caliph, Al-Ma'mun, yeah, and the Shia don't really like Al-Ma'mun. And so from the time of really the Baytul Hikmah all the way through the School of Toledo, and of course the recapture or the Reconquista, the reconquest of Iberia by the Spanish Christians, this is really what's considered the golden age of Islam, if you will. Let's say that it is an Orientalist denomination, okay? But nevertheless, it's quite a useful denomination, because this was the time where the Islamic civilization and culture and architecture and music and literature and poetry and engineering and mathematics, you know, chemistry, science really took over, you know, the pole position worldwide, really, and all of the different cultures looked to Islam to get their inspiration for knowledge and wisdom. Not like today, where the Muslims look to the West, okay? And basically everyone looks to the West for innovation and research and development and philosophy and arts and all these kind of sociocultural contributions, yeah, are mainly coming from the West on the global scale, which is not to say that there aren't, you know, pockets of all of these things elsewhere. We see, of course, today somewhat of a change in power factors across the globe, and hopefully there will be philosophical movements that follow that and artistic movements that follow that. We'll see what happens. We'll go into that a little bit later today. But so you have this kind of golden age of Islam where the famous Islamic philosophers like Al-Kindi, Al-Farabi, everyone read Farabi. I just really recommend you to read Farabi, okay? the city of wisdom, yeah, it's called. And it's just a brilliant exposition on Islamic philosophy. Okay. So Al-Kindi, Al-Farabi, Jabr, Ibn Sina, Avicenna, of course, the very famous, globally famous philosopher. Movies have been done about Avicenna, Ibn Sina. He was also a doctor. He was an anatomist. He was a mathematician. He was a philosopher. He was an artist. So he was really what they call a polymath. Polymath means someone who can just do all of these different sciences at the same time, yeah. Ghazali, of course, huge guy in philosophy. Ibn Tufayl, wonderful Andalusian Spanish Muslim philosopher, great books written by Ibn Tufayl. Ibn Rushd, Averroes, I'm sure you've heard of Ibn Rushd. He's done great economic theory. There's a nice juxtaposition in Islamic philosophy between Ghazali and Ibn Rushd, okay, because Ghazali writes a book called the so-called Incoherence of the Philosophers, in which he kind of criticizes the philosophers who in their time maybe went outside of Islam from his point of view, or maybe they didn't stay so much to the Shariat, but they kind of went outside, and they were trying to make everything a philosophy, and what is God and what is the Prophet and this. And so Ghazali kind of pulled it back together, and he said, this is Islam and this is philosophy. So he in his time, maybe he did something that was necessary for the Ummah, Wallahu A'lam, God knows best. But Ibn Rushd, because the impact at that time of the discussion was that Ghazali had such a large impact that from that point on, the philosophy of the Muslims started to kind of decline, okay? And also the fortunes of the Islamic empires also start to decline, okay? So if you look at the connection between philosophical development and history, you can say, now it's of course debatable, but you can say that pretty much the same time that the golden age of Islam start to go down is also the same time that Ghazali's book become very popular, and let's say the Hanbalis, and this kind of very dogmatic, rigid approach to thinking start to kind of take over, yeah? Now, there have been lots of debates held about that, but that certainly is a juxtaposition, because Ibn Rushd was on the other side, and he wrote a book challenging Ghazali, of course, many years later, which was called The Incoherence of the Incoherence, in which he very specifically criticizes Ghazali and, picks up on that whole discussion, yeah? Is it okay from the English? Are you guys understanding me?
Yeah.
Rocco, are you with me?
Yes.
Alhamdulillah. Okay, Samana June, any questions? Okay, everything easy, no? Good. So any question, please ask, yeah? So that's a really important kind of historical controversy between Ghazali and Ibn Rushd that you should really, if you're interested in Islamic philosophy, you should study a little bit. In year 3, okay, we're going to go, for those of you who want to, after year 2, continue with, let's see if Hassan does it. Hopefully I can convince Hassan to do another year. But hopefully Hassan will take you guys into year 3, inshallah, and then we will study Islamic philosophy much more deeply, okay? So this is just to give you a taste, yeah? But hopefully, if you're really interested to continue, hopefully you'll be able to continue. Even if we're lucky, we get Hassan, you can even continue in Bulgarian. This would obviously be very good for you guys. I'll see what we can do, but otherwise you're very welcome to stay with us, and we continue inshallah in English, okay? So Ibn Arabi, Muhyiddin Ibn Arabi, the huge philosopher from Andalusian Spain, yeah? And, he wrote the Futuhat al-Makkiyah, the huge book, actually several books or several volumes of books. And he was very much, today he would be considered a syncretic philosopher, which means what? Syncretic means I can take from Judaism, I can take from Christians, I can take from, the pagans, and I have my Islam, and then I put the thinking of the Christians and the Jews and even the pagans into my Islamic picture. and I have this great philosophical system that finally, like, I don't know if you can see it anymore. Here, somehow this sunshine over there, the light shines for everyone. Yeah. So the philosophy of Ibn Arabi is a little bit like this. Yeah. The light shines on everyone, and who you are, you can receive the light. Yeah. Doesn't matter what the name of your religion is. And he's always saying this in his different works. Yeah. He's very provocative for many. Well, let's say that for many Muslims, even today, he's very provocative. And the more kind of dogmatic, strict Muslims are not really going to understand Ibn Arabi, or they're not going to follow Ibn Arabi too much. Yeah, because he's a very open-minded guy. He wrote a whole book of love poems for his Persian lover, whom he met on a pilgrimage to Mecca. He went to Umrah in Mecca, and he met a young Persian lady. That's the story of Ibn Arabi. Yeah, well, not Hamsarish. Let's say his adma. He wanted, I think, for her to be Hamsar. I don't know if she wanted or not. Yeah, but then he wrote all of these poems. Yeah, and in the poems is a love for the girl. Yeah, at the same time, it's deep mystical conversation. Yeah, so certainly controversial, but beautiful, beautiful poetry and beautiful mystical philosophy. Okay, Shahabuddin Suhrawardi, the Sheikh al-Ishraq, the teacher of lights, yeah, beautiful, beautiful work. Qudus al-Sirat, he happens to be my favorite philosopher. Suhrawardi, I really encourage you to read Shahabuddin Suhrawardi. So there are different Suhrawardis, okay? So I'm talking about Shahabuddin Suhrawardi. And then, of course, on the Shia side, of course, the philosophy never really stopped, because the philosophy of the Shia went from Payghambar Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam to Hazrat Ali, Imam Ali, and Hazrat Fatima alayhum assalam ajmain, to Hassan and Hussein alayhum assalam, Ali Zainul Abidin, Muhammad Baqir, Zayd ibn Ali, okay? And all of the Imams of the Ahl al Bayt really have always taken philosophy and developed it one step further, one step further, one step further, one step. So in every generation, Asim Rasi of the Zaydiyah was a great, greatly philosophical thinking guy. We don't really have too much works of him. There's a rebuttal of an atheist, which has some philosophical content, but it's clear that the guy, had a lot going on up there in his brain. So great examples from Ahl al Bayt. So of course the Ahl al Bayt, the family of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, have a lot of philosophical tradition as well. Yeah, and then Sadruddin Shirazi, the huge Shia Jafari philosopher of the Safavid era. Okay, do you know Sadruddin Shirazi? Yeah, no? Yeah. So he's a big one. What he does a beautiful thing, which is that he takes all of the systems of epistemology, okay? So the word epistemology means how I teach you, okay? Now the epistemology is, we have a video call, okay? I have lovely sister Samana with us now, and I'm speaking with her personally, but for you guys, we're online, I'm sharing from my Imam, I'm sharing to you, from Imam Razvi alayhi salam, I'm sharing with you. And you maybe share with your families if tonight you go home and you speak with your lovely wives or brothers or children or parents. Okay, today's Mother's Day, so make sure to, all of you, call your mamas. Okay, if your mama, inshallah, is still alive, please remember to call your mothers, inshallah, and wish them happy Mother's Day. And so this is how I'm teaching you, but in different times, teaching has happened differently. So like the ulama have typically taught by the letter, okay, by having a Hawza, or by a madrasa, or by writing the script and passing on to the next generation, the next generation, the next generation. Before, in the old, days of the Arabs, they used to teach through poetry. So the famous poets would recite the glorious battles of the Arabs, how they fought with each other and who were the heroes and maybe the love stories and so on, yeah? And today, a lot of our epistemology coming from you know, Instagram, Facebook, social media. So this is, of course, another avenue, unfortunately, sometimes, but sometimes it's also very good, yeah, because we can meet a lot of people and have a lot of conversations that we couldn't have before. So there's also a good side to the social media. But certainly a lot of epistemology happening through social media. And of course, the universities, you know, since the Middle Ages, the universities are the main centers of philosophy and epistemology, okay? So when we talk about Sadruddin Shirazi, Qudus al-Sirat, making an epistemological structure, this is also very interesting and maybe worth a research topic for your thesis, is how he orders the different levels of epistemology. So he says Sharia is like, he makes like a house, you know, and he says Sharia is the foundation of the house, okay? If you don't have a foundation, you cannot have a house, okay? So obviously you have to have Sharia, but then the next level is ilm and usul and hukmat and ta'wil and ta'lim and the tafsir and the knowledge, let's say the kind of written knowledge that comes through studying the Qur'an and studying the hadith and studying the tariq or the history of Islam in a more detailed way, and also the interpretations, the dogmatic, let's say, aql-oriented or mind-oriented interpretations of the main sources of Islam, being the Qur'an and the Sunnah and the Ahl al Bayt, of course, the history of the Ahl al Bayt. And then the highest level, of course, then comes the level of philosophy, which is kind of dialectic debate. So, you know, free will versus determinism, or the attributes of Allah, the 99 attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala compared to the essence of Allah himself. So the Isma al-Husna, are they separate from Allah, or is this all one Allah? This was another big debate historically, philosophically. And of course, the role of philosophy in the entire Islamic epistemology as such, as we saw in the discussion between Ghazali and Ibn Rushd. Peace be upon them both. May God preserve their secrets. So, and he reserves the highest level. He reserves the highest level for this. Let me see if I can do this. How is this going to work? Yeah, something like this. Yeah, like when you get this light that just comes from God. You know what's called wahi, or what's called ilham. So when you get the stations of light, you know, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is just giving you like this. Like maybe if someone had a dream about the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the Prophet Muhammad opens him a white door, and he goes into the door and he's filled with light. Okay, this is one very simple example of this kind of intuitive epistemology, receiving the wisdom directly from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Sheikh Shahabuddin Suhrawardi Qudus Sirat used to talk about this in his in his Hikmatul Ishraq, his wisdom of lights, and he explains how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can send you light on different levels, and how each one of us, through what is called al-dhawq in Arabic. Al-dhawq means like the taste, okay, the taste of the thing, how we can experience higher levels of intuition through the will of Allah. Bi-idhnillah, inshallah, wallahu a'lam. So this is the highest level of philosophy or knowledge, okay, is the intuitive knowledge, batiniya or irfaniyat, okay, ma'navi, that you can get from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay, so Sadruddin Shirazi puts this at the very top. Okay, so these are some different theories of some of the different philosophers that impacted Islam very profoundly, and there are of course many others, and we could enter this subject for a very long time, but I just want to give you a little taste, just a little taste of some of the main characters, okay? Now, what they did, particularly at the beginning of the process, when the Abbasid Caliphate came, is that the Abbasids took the knowledge of the Greeks and Abbasiyan از یونانی هایانه علم گرفتن و ترجمه کردن، بعد یانه شروع فلسفه اسلامی بود، یعنی میگم نه Yes, yes, yes. This was the beginning of this, no? Of course, parallel to Ahl al Bayt, no? That's always taking the Ma'navi and the Falsafi also do it. But this separate level is like this, no? So these are different processes that's happening inside Islam. So with the start of the Abbasid Caliphate, basically the Greek translations begin into Arabic, and the guys like Al-Kindi and Al-Farabi, and especially Ibn Sina, Avicenna, are reading the ancient Greek works and they're translating it into Arabic and then or Persian, and then they're writing their own works, okay, and developing their own ideas and putting it in the context of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, okay. So this is the basis of Islamic philosophy, and they reinterpreted in the light of Islam, and they created extensive philosophical treatises which shaped and influenced the history of world philosophy across the centuries, okay? And the Persian mystical poets also, like Hafez and Rumi and Sa'di and Firdausi and Khayyam in his own way, they also, in their poetic way, Attar, they all expressed a very deep philosophy, okay? And so we don't just limit philosophy to, you know, a guy sitting there and, you know, somehow he reads a Greek book and then he translates it and then he has these thoughts and then he writes. Why? I mean, philosophy is love of wisdom, right? Like we said at the very beginning of the discussion, okay? And love of wisdom means wisdom that come from anywhere. Yeah, it can come from anywhere. It can come from a child, it can come from nature, it can come from a book, but it can come from music, or it can come from economics, it can even come from politics, okay? It can come from any source of wisdom, any source of wisdom. Finally, all wisdom goes back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and all wisdom comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when we love wisdom, when we practice philosophy, we should not just narrow mind to what's being taught today as philosophy in universities, but we should be very open about what wisdom is and see how we can every second of our lives breathe philosophy, breathe in the philosophy, breathe out the philosophy, you know, breathe in the philosophy, breathe out the philosophy. Everywhere we look, there's philosophy, yeah? And so this is important, okay? And so we should look for philosophy in everything that we do, yeah? And of course, when you read Attar, Fariduddin Attar, or if you read Maulana Jalaluddin Rumi, or if you read, you know, Hafez, whose name is Hafez because he memorized the Qur'an, yeah? If you read Sa'di, you'll find this very, very deep philosophy, inshallah, okay? And as I said, in year 3 of the Unity Hawza in Falsafia Islamia, we'll definitely be researching all these very, very deep sources of Islamic philosophy. Okay, any questions so far?
I don't have anything.
Okay. Always feel free to ask. The question is the core of philosophy, not the answer, okay? Let's be very clear on this. Okay? The core of philosophy is the question. It's not the answer. Okay? Let's be very clear on that. So, because you always enter philosophy with a question, okay? If you have the answer, why you're going to ask, why you're going to research, yeah? But because you have the question, then the door opens, yeah? So the question is like the key that opens the door, okay? So always ask questions. Exactly, and then as we discussed on another level, Shia Islam itself has also, you know, had this track of philosophy through the Ahl al Bayt, and then later, the so-called Irfaniyat, which was developed in the time of Safaviyan, in the time of the Safavids, okay, particularly through Sadruddin Shirazi and Mir Damad and all of the students of that school, no? But also even Sheikh Shahabuddin Suhrawardi was a very Shia-leaning guy. He kind of got in trouble with Salahuddin from Jerusalem because yeah, he was teaching his son. I think he was the court teacher of philosophy for his son, and some of the guys in the court became jealous and they accused him of being Shia. So unfortunately, he was killed. Yeah. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. And this is a somewhat sad ending of a very young guy. I think he was maybe 36 when he died, and he had already created all this great works of literature. So Shahabuddin Suravardi is very interesting. I think for you, very interesting case. Fikonam Shiabu. Fikonam, yeah. I think so, yeah. I'm not sure, we can look, but I think a very young age, no? Very young age. And so what we have when we talk about this deeper, energetic, mystical energy, or this, remember we talked about the intuitive level of epistemology, al-dhawq, or the taste, or the light. We have this light here today. And we call this irfaniyat, okay? And this irfaniyat, irfan is the word that means this kind of elevated wisdom or spiritual wisdom, okay? Also, the Turkish people have a lot of irfaniyat in their tasawwuf, or all of the Ottoman people, who experience the Sufi orders, they all have a very high degree of philosophy in their tasawwuf or in their irfaniyat, okay? So the Quran, of course, itself is profoundly shaped by philosophy, okay? And, you could equally say we could start with this subject rather than putting this at the end. We could put it at the beginning, okay? We could have put this at the beginning and said, look, the Quran is itself highly, deeply philosophical work. The Quran itself poses many deep and sensory questions about human reason and challenges its readers to ponder and develop their own reply to higher reason, al-aql, okay, for themselves, okay? And the philosophical search for truth is deeply anchored in the Quran and the actions of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and inextricably linked with them. So you cannot separate the actions of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam from a very deep place of revelation and enlightenment and experience and wisdom, okay? Love of wisdom, philosophy, love of wisdom, okay? It cannot be separated. Otherwise, we're saying the Prophet simply acted like a soldier. He just did what the angel said. He didn't think about anything. There are a lot of Muslims who live their lives like this, yeah? It's a very sad situation. But the fact of the matter is that the Prophet Muhammad was a very deep and influential thinker and philosopher. And in fact, for those of you who know a little bit about the story of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, before the angel Jibra'il alayhi salam came to visit the Prophet Muhammad, he spent weeks and months going to the mountains of Hira in the area of Mecca, retreating, meditating, thinking, reflecting, doing all this self-work, you can say work on the self, okay, in isolation, before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala opened this door of light and said, may Jibra'il alayhi salam teach the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam about the deen and about Islam, Iman, Ihsan, and open the door of revelation. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Iqra bismi rabbika alladhi khalaq, khalaqal insana min 'alaq. Okay? So, Sadiqallahu al-Azim. So before all of this revelation happened, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam went to the mountains and he retreated and he asked himself the questions and he worked on his philosophy. So there cannot be any separation of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam from love of wisdom, philosophy, okay? That does not mean that everything that is done in the name of philosophy correspond with the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, okay? That's why we call it Islamic philosophy, because it is philosophy within the Shariat, okay? We don't use philosophy as a kind of a screw to change the Shariat or escape the Shariat, find different ways of doing lots of nonsense. On the contrary, we use the philosophy to underpin or strengthen or validate the Sharia, if you will, okay? And just as the Quran ponders on the truth, okay, so does the famous Romanian philosopher Ionescu, propose that it is actually the question and not the answer that provides clarity, just as we discussed before. Okay? وَمَا أَدْرَاكَ مَا الْحَقَّ. Okay? What do you understand by perfect truth? Is at the very beginning of Surah Al-Haqqa is number 69 in the Qur'an, and the first three ayat, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Al-Haqqa ma wal-Haqqa wa ma adraka ma al-Haqqa. Okay? Just to ask the question, what is truth or perfect truth? Or what do you understand with perfect truth? Okay, so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is challenging us with a philosophical question and asking us, in fact, friendly challenge, yeah, because He loves us, He's challenging us. Friendly challenging, go inside, ask, what is perfect truth? Okay, so many of the ayats in the Quran are filled with questions, yeah, that we should answer, inshallah. Okay, and you can find more than 50 references to thinking and reflecting al-aql in the Quran. Okay, so we see that the Quran itself is profoundly shaped by philosophical communication of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through the angel, Archangel Jibreel alayhi salam, to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam for all of humanity. Okay, and I urge you to, look up these sources here, to see the impact again of the Islamic philosophy on the Renaissance movement, the Enlightenment movement, the Romantic movement of philosophical Europe, as a case study in the power and the influence of Islamic philosophy, inshallah. Do you have any questions at this point for today?
No.
Okay, any remarks, anything you'd like to add? Okay, is this just for me for a feedback? Is this something that you already know? Is this like totally crystal clear and easy for you, or are you learning something? Is there something new for you?
It's definitely not crystal clear.
Okay.
But
okay.
From the historical point of view, I know about some stuff, but not. But like what the works of these guys are, I don't have that much idea of.
Okay, so in year 3, as I said, which would be basically next year for you guys, starting in October, if you decide to continue, inshallah, we'd love to have you, and hopefully we keep Hassan John, and you can continue in Bulgarian if everything works out. And in that case, you'll really get a deep dive into Islamic philosophy and study the individual philosophers and what they contributed to Islamic philosophy. So don't worry at all, step by step, everything step by step. What I'd like you to do as a little homework, if you like, is what we talked about today. I'll send this document to you in the team chat, so please just look at it and feel free to research it a little bit and find something in Islamic philosophy that really has a value to you, inshallah. I would say make this your homework maybe till our next class, which I'm just thinking because we're getting close to the end of the year. I think we'll have one more class now in May, at the end of May, and then the last class would be in June. So we have classes 9 and 10 still coming up. And then I would like you guys to think about what you would like to do for your final thesis. Okay, so please, have you guys thought about that, or do you have any, Veli and Rocco and Samana? I think for Samana we know what the topic will be, but maybe from Veli and Rocco, do you have any idea what kind of a final thesis you'd like to make? So what principle you like to choose and how you would like to develop it?
I haven't thought about it, so
okay. So put some thought into it, and be ready to be ready basically by August. Okay, by the beginning of August. What I get from you guys, just to remind you, is a 3 or 4 page paper. Okay, maybe 5 pages, also okay. Taking one of the 10 principles of Islam, of the Usul ad-Din as we're learning them now, and you kind of deep dive into the principle and you write something about the principle, and then you present it in one of the class. Like we'll make an extra class for the presentation. So the same way that I'm presenting to you now, you would actually be the one presenting for maybe 15 minutes and maybe 5 minutes of questions if anybody wants to ask any questions. Yeah. So please pick a subject, and maybe by next class, please tell me what subject you pick. Okay. And then individually we'll be in contact and try to get you on the right path for your thesis, so that inshallah by August you have a nice 3 or 4 page paper. Okay. It's understood?
Yep.
Rocco, you with us?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. Okay, so both you guys, and I know that Samana June already has a thesis topic that she's working on. So if you two will also please come up with your, you can just tell me, just send me an SMS. Okay, this is the idea that I had. You know, I really like principle 5, you know, Islam is interreligious dialogue, or I really liked principle 6, which is Islam is justice, or whichever one of the principles that we study so far. And just let me know what you'd like to do, and let's start from there. Okay, and I'm sure you'll both do great theses, inshallah. I look forward to your presentation in August, inshallah. Okay, so let's say Fatiha, please, to close for today. Thank you very much for joining. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Okay, guys, thank you so much. I wish you guys have a great week going forward, and we'll be in touch very soon, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.